The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the streetlights, and I swear I could hear my heart pounding louder than the storm. I was 24, standing outside the diner where my stepbrother, Ethan, worked the late shift, my breath fogging in the chilly air. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the family fallout that sent us to opposite coasts, and now here I was, about to crash back into his life. My name's Caleb, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking and a habit of falling for the wrong people. I'd moved to Seattle for a fresh start after a breakup that left me raw, hoping the city's gray skies and coffee shops would stitch me back together. But when Mom called to say Ethan was in town, living just a few miles away, it felt like fate was playing a cruel joke. Ethan, the guy who'd been my teenage hero, my confidant, my chaos, until he vanished from my life at 18, claiming he was done with family drama. Now, at 26, he was a stranger with the same sharp jawline and green eyes that used to make me feel safe. I pushed open the diner door, the bell jingling like a warning. The place smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions, and there he was, wiping down the counter with a rag, his flannel shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Ethan looked up, and for a split second his face froze. Surprise, maybe, or something heavier. "Caleb?" he said, his voice low, like he wasn't sure I was real. "Hey, Ethan." I managed, my throat tight. "Long time." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, no kidding. What are you doing here?" I wanted to say I missed him, that I'd spent years wondering what went wrong, but instead, I shrugged. "Heard you were in town. Thought I'd see if you still suck at making coffee." He laughed, a sharp, familiar sound that hit me like a memory. "Still better than you at it," he shot back, tossing the rag aside. But there was a wall between us, built from years of silence and unspoken grudges. I didn't know how to tear it down or if I even should. We sat in a booth, the vinyl squeaking under us, and talked about nothing. His job, my freelance gigs, the Seahawks' latest game, surface-level stuff, safe. But every time his eyes met mine, I felt a tug, like a current pulling me under. Ethan had always been magnetic, the kind of guy who could charm anyone with a grin and a bad joke. Back when we were teens, living under the same roof after our parents' whirlwind marriage, we'd been inseparable. Late nights sneaking beers, whispering secrets in the dark, laughing until we couldn't breathe. I'd come out to him at 16, terrified he'd pull away, but he just hugged me and said, "You're still you, Caleb. That's what matters." He was straight, always had a girlfriend or two, but he'd been my rock, until he wasn't. "Why'd you leave?" I blurted, the question slipping out before I could stop it. The diner was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the patter of rain outside. Ethan's jaw tightened. He leaned back, arms crossed. "You know why. Mom and your dad, they made it impossible. The fighting, the ultimatums. I had to get out." "You didn't just leave them," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "You left me." He looked away, his fingers tapping the table. "I didn't mean to. It just happened. I thought you'd be better off without me dragging you into my mess." "Your mess?" I scoffed. "Ethan, you were my family." He didn't answer, just stared at the table like it held all the answers. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until he finally said, "I'm here now, aren't I?" But was he? I didn't know what here meant anymore. We exchanged numbers, promised to meet up again. But as I stepped back into the rain, I felt more lost than ever. Ethan was back in my life, but he was different. Guarded, distant, like he was hiding something. Or maybe I was the one hiding, too scared to admit how much I still cared. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm. Coffee runs, late-night texts, walks through Pike Place Market where we'd argue over who made better clam chowder. Ethan was still Ethan, witty, stubborn, quick to tease, but there were cracks in his armor. He'd dodge questions about his past, his relationships, his plans. "Live in the moment, Caleb," he'd say, flashing that grin. But I saw the shadows in his eyes, the way he'd tense when I got too close to the truth. One night, we ended up at a dive bar in Capitol Hill, the kind of place with sticky floors and neon signs. I'd just finished a freelance project, and Ethan insisted on celebrating. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his beer against mine. His knee brushed mine under the table, and I froze, hyper-aware of the heat of his leg. It was nothing, I told myself. He was straight. He'd always been straight. But the air between us felt charged, like a storm about to break. "You ever think about what could have been?" I asked, the words slipping out after my second drink. "If you hadn't left?" Ethan's smile faded. He swirled his beer, staring into it like it was a crystal ball. "Every day," he said quietly. "But I'm not good at staying, Caleb. Never have been." "You stayed tonight," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something raw, unguarded, almost desperate. For a moment, I thought he might say something, but then he laughed, breaking the spell. "Yeah, well, don't get used to it." But I was already used to it, to him, and that scared me more than anything. The weeks blurred into a strange dance of closeness and distance. Ethan would pull me in with a late-night call or a shared joke, then push me away with a vague excuse or a missed text. I told myself I was fine with it, that I could handle just being his friend, his stepbrother, whatever we were now. But every time he brushed past me in his cramped apartment, every time his laugh filled the air, I felt that pull again, stronger and more dangerous. One Saturday, he invited me to a hiking trail just outside Seattle, a rugged path winding through evergreen forests and rocky cliffs. The air was crisp, the sky a rare clear blue, and Ethan was in his element, bounding ahead like a kid, his flannel shirt untucked and his boots caked with mud. "Come on, Caleb, keep up," he called, his voice echoing through the trees. I caught up, breathless, and found him perched on a boulder overlooking a valley. The view was stunning. Emerald hills rolling into the distance, the faint shimmer of a river below. Ethan handed me a water bottle, his fingers grazing mine. "Worth the climb, right?" he said, his eyes bright. "Yeah," I said, but I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at him, at the way the sunlight caught the stubble on his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. I wanted to ask him what we were doing, why it felt like we were teetering on the edge of something bigger, but I didn't. Instead, I sat beside him, our shoulders brushing, and let the moment stretch. That night, back at his place, everything changed. We were sprawled on his couch, a half-empty pizza box between us, some old sci-fi movie playing on his ancient TV. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering screen and a single lamp. Ethan was quieter than usual, his usual banter replaced by a restless energy. He kept glancing at me, then away, like he was wrestling with something. "You okay?" I asked, nudging his foot with mine. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and ran a hand through his hair. "Caleb, you ever feel like you're running from something, but you don't know what?" I swallowed, my heart picking up speed. "Yeah, all the time." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "I don't want to run anymore," he said. So soft I almost missed it. And then, before I could process it, He leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was hungry, desperate, like he'd been holding it back for years. His hands found my face, pulling me closer, and I kissed him back, my mind reeling. Ethan, my stepbrother, the guy who'd sworn he was straight, was kissing me like his life depended on it. Every doubt, every fear, melted away in the heat of that moment. But then he pulled back, his breath ragged, his eyes wide with panic. I can't, he stammered, standing up so fast he knocked over the pizza box. This isn't, I'm not. Ethan, wait, I said, reaching for him, but he was already halfway to the door. I'm sorry, Caleb, he said, his voice breaking. I can't do this. And then he was gone, the door slamming behind him, leaving me alone with the echo of his kiss and 1,000 questions. I didn't hear from him for days. No texts, no calls, just silence. I replayed that night over and over, dissecting every moment, every word. Had I pushed too hard? Had I misread him? But no, that kiss wasn't a mistake. It was real, raw, undeniable, and it terrified him. I threw myself into work, sketching designs until my eyes burned, but Ethan was everywhere. In the curve of a line, the shadow of a memory. I wanted to hate him for running, but I couldn't. I knew what it was like to be scared of your own truth, to feel like the world would break if you let it out. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I showed up at his apartment, banging on the door until he opened it. He looked wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, hair a mess, like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, I said, pushing past him. Caleb, I told you I can't. Stop. I cut him off. You don't get to kiss me like that and then disappear. You don't get to act like it didn't happen. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I don't know what I'm doing, okay? I thought I was straight. I've always been straight. But with you, he trailed off, his voice barely a whisper. It's different. My heart ached for him, for the war he was fighting inside himself. I sat beside him, careful not to touch. It's okay to be confused, I said. It's okay to not have it all figured out, but you don't have to go through it alone. He looked at me, his eyes glistening. What if I screw this up? What if I hurt you? Then we figure it out, I said. Together. For the first time in days, he smiled. A small, fragile thing, but it was enough. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. Ethan didn't run again, but he didn't dive in either. We spent evenings together, cooking terrible pasta or binge-watching shows, tiptoeing around the thing between us. Every touch, a hand on my arm, a brush of shoulders, felt like a spark, but he'd pull back just as fast, like he was testing the waters but afraid to drown. I tried to give him space, to let him figure out what he wanted, but it was hard. I'd been out for years, comfortable in my skin, but Ethan was unraveling. He'd spent his life fitting into a box, straight, confident, untouchable, and now that box was crumbling. I saw it in the way he'd tense when I got too close, the way he'd change the subject when I asked about his past. One night, we ended up at a small art gallery in Fremont, a favor to a friend whose paintings were on display. The place was crowded, filled with hipsters sipping cheap wine and murmuring about vibes. Ethan seemed out of place, his hands shoved in his pockets, but he stayed close to me, his shoulder brushing mine as we moved through the crowd. One painting caught my eye, a chaotic swirl of blues and reds, like a storm trapped on canvas. This one's you, I said, nudging him. All fire and mess. He laughed, but it was strained. And what's yours? He asked, pointing to a quieter piece. a soft gradient of greens and golds. This one, steady, but deeper than it looks. I felt my face heat up. He saw me, really saw me, and it made my chest ache. We stood there, staring at the paintings, the noise of the gallery fading away. "Ethan," I said, turning to him, "what are we doing?" He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the painting. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't want to lose you again." That was enough for me for now. We left the gallery and walked through the chilly streets, our breath visible in the night air. At a quiet park, we sat on a bench under an oak tree, the city lights twinkling in the distance. His hand rested on the bench, inches from mine, and I felt the weight of everything unsaid. "Tell me something real," I said, my voice soft. "Something you've never told anyone." He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "When I left, back when we were kids, I didn't just leave because of our parents. I left because I was scared. Scared of how much I needed you. Scared of what it meant." My heart stopped. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him close, but I waited. "I told myself I was straight because it was easier," he continued. "It fit. But then you showed up again, and it's like everything I thought I knew about myself fell apart." I took a chance and slid my hand over his, my fingers lacing with his. He didn't pull away. "You don't have to have all the answers," I said. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He squeezed my hand, his grip tight, like he was afraid I'd vanish. And in that moment, under the oak tree with the world quiet around us, I felt like we were finally starting to find our way. But nothing's ever that simple. A week later, Ethan got a call from his ex, a woman named Lauren he'd dated on and off for years. She was in town, wanted to meet up, and Ethan, still wrestling with his identity, agreed. He didn't tell me at first, but I saw the text light up his phone when we were grabbing coffee. "Lauren's back?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Yeah," he said, not meeting my eyes, "just catching up. No big deal." But it was a big deal. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a mix of jealousy and fear. I didn't doubt Ethan's feelings for me, or at least I didn't want to. But Lauren was a reminder of the life he'd known, the one where he didn't have to question who he was. I told myself to trust him, but doubt crept in like a thief. When he came back from seeing her, he was different, quieter, more distant. We were at my apartment, splitting a bottle of wine, when he finally spoke. "She wants to try again," he said, staring at the floor. "Says she misses me." My heart sank. "And what do you want?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "I don't know," he said, his frustration spilling over. "I care about her, Caleb. I always have. But you're in my head all the time. I can't shake you." "Then don't," I said, stepping closer. "Don't shake me." He looked at me, torn, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me again. But instead, he turned away. "I need time," he said. "I'm sorry." Time. It's a funny thing how it can stretch and compress, how it can heal or hurt. For me, it hurt. Ethan's "I need time" echoed in my head, a constant reminder that I was waiting for him to choose. Not just between me and Lauren, but between the life he'd always known and the one he was afraid to want. I tried to stay busy, burying myself in work, but every design I sketched felt like a piece of him. Bold lines, sharp edges, a storm of color. He didn't ghost me, not exactly. We still texted, still met for coffee, but there was a distance now, a hesitation in his voice. I hated it, but I didn't push. I'd learned the hard way that you can't force someone to face their truth. So I waited, and I hoped, and I tried not to let it break me. One rainy afternoon, I got a call from my mom. She was in town for a conference and wanted to meet up. I hadn't seen her in months. Not since she and Ethan's dad split for good. We met at a cozy cafe downtown, and over lattes she asked about Ethan. I hesitated, then told her the truth, or at least part of it. That we were reconnecting, that it was complicated. She sighed, stirring her coffee. Ethan's always been a runner, she said. Even as a kid. When things got hard, he'd bolt. But he always came back to you, Caleb. Always. Her words stuck with me. A small spark of hope. But hope is a dangerous thing. It makes you vulnerable. And I was already so damn vulnerable. That night, Ethan showed up at my door, soaked from the rain, his eyes wild. I broke it off with Lauren, he said before I could even say hello. For good. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Why? Because it's not her I want, he said, stepping closer. It's you. It's always been you. This time, when he kissed me, it wasn't desperate or panicked. It was slow, deliberate, like he was finally sure. I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his wet hair, and for the first time, I let myself believe this could be real. But life doesn't let you off that easy. The next day, I got a call from my boss. An urgent project in Portland, a week-long trip. I didn't want to leave, not now. Not when Ethan and I were finally starting to figure things out. But he insisted I go. We're not going anywhere, he said, squeezing my hand. I'll be here when you get back. Portland was a blur of late nights and deadlines, but Ethan and I texted constantly, his messages a lifeline. He sent me photos of his diner shifts, bad jokes, even a selfie of him at the park where we'd sat under the oak tree. Miss you, he wrote, and I felt my heart swell. When I got back to Seattle, I went straight to his apartment. He opened the door, and before I could say anything, he pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. I'm done running, he whispered. I'm in this, Caleb. All the way. We spent the night talking, really talking about everything. His fears, my hopes, the messy, beautiful thing we were building. He told me about the years he'd spent trying to fit into a mold that never felt right, the girlfriends he'd cared about but never loved the way he thought he should. I didn't know what I was missing, he said, his hand resting on mine. Until you. I wanted to freeze that moment, to hold onto it forever. But the world keeps turning, and ours was about to get a lot more complicated. A few days later, Ethan got a letter from his dad. I was at his apartment when he opened it, his face going pale as he read. He's in town, Ethan said, his voice flat. Wants to meet. Says he's sorry for everything. Ethan's dad, Mark, had been a sore spot for years. He'd never accepted me as part of the family, never understood why Ethan and I were so close. When Ethan left at 18, Mark had been part of the reason, a constant source of pressure, always pushing Ethan to be someone he wasn't. You don't have to see him, I said, but Ethan shook his head. I need to, he said. If I'm going to move forward, I need to close that door. I didn't like it, but I understood. Some ghosts you have to face head-on. The meeting with Mark was set for a quiet diner across town, not Ethan's usual spot. I offered to go with him, but he said he needed to do this alone. I'll be fine, he promised, but the tension in his jaw told a different story. I spent the day pacing my apartment, checking my phone, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. When Ethan finally texted, it was just 2 words, "It's done." I raced to his place, my heart in my throat. He opened the door, looking drained but not broken. He apologized, Ethan said, sinking onto the couch. Said he was wrong about a lot of things, but it's too late for him and me. I sat beside him, my hand finding his. You okay? He nodded, but his eyes were distant. He asked about you. Wanted to know if we were, together. My stomach twisted. What did you say? I told him the truth, Ethan said, his voice steady. That I love you. That I'm figuring out what that means. But I'm not hiding it anymore. I froze, the weight of his words hitting me like a tidal wave. Love. He'd said it out loud, no hesitation. I leaned in and kissed him, soft and slow, pouring everything I felt into it. I love you too, I whispered against his lips, and for the first time, I saw him smile without a trace of fear. The months that followed weren't perfect. Ethan was still navigating his identity, still learning to live openly as someone who didn't fit neatly into a box. There were days when doubt crept in, when old habits made him pull back. But he didn't run. Not anymore. We built a life together piece by piece. Weekend hikes, late-night diner shifts, quiet moments on that park bench under the oak tree. We faced challenges, whispers from coworkers, raised eyebrows from strangers, but we faced them together. And every time Ethan took my hand in public, every time he introduced me as his partner, I felt a pride that outweighed any fear. One evening, as we sat in that same park, the city lights glittering below, Ethan turned to me. He said, I used to think love was about fitting into someone else's life, but with you it's about building something new, something ours. I smiled, my heart full. Something real, I said. He nodded, pulling me close. Something worth staying for. And as the stars came out, I knew we'd found it. A love that didn't need labels, that didn't need to make sense to anyone but us. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And that was enough.